Hey everybody, good morning. Sorry, I had my mic turned around. Good morning. So yeah, this is I'm Scott. This is Subterranean Visions, kind of taken from the Kerouac, the Subterraneans, which was kind of a really big exploration into the jazz scene, late '40s, early '50s, and just I had a really good idea of what it was to look into music, try to look into it and see what it actually what it uncovered, was the feel, how the interpretation and everything like that. I thought it was a really great literary description of sort of fascination with music. So I've kind of taken a bit of that and took it into Subterranean Vision. So yeah, it's about exploration, going down into the underground and finding all the little elements and treasures that we can find, and then sharing them. So, and that goes both ways. So yeah, I've been in music, pretty much my whole life, independent playing, performing, writing, just doing research and just, audio stuff, did some building instruments here and there. This is one of the 12 strings that I decided I wanted to do it's based off of a Lead Belly design, off his guitar that I think is in the, it's one of the big museums. I forget the name. I don't know if it's the Library of Congress or it's another big music museum. But yeah, got some of the specs off of that from a friend and decided I wanted to build one. So, but yeah, what we're here for today, like I said, we're just continue doing full albums. I also want to say all the requests are going to go into sort of content. So once a month, I'm going to take all your requests and put them into sort of a 3 or 4 song medley. And just, show my appreciation for all that in that way. And then also any requests. Currently, I want to jump into some genres that I haven't done as much as. So I want to do sort of electric blues best of, and also a punk best of. So anybody has recommendations to the top 3, top 5, whatever, blues, electric blues, and punk of all time, I'm going to take everybody's input and then just filter that out and then give it back and looking to put that into a video mixture with some of mine, some of yours, and try to get a good collection of that sorts. So yeah, that being said, we're continuing our Canterbury scene retrospective, and yeah, so we've already done, God, who have we done? We've done the David Allen Trio, we've done the Wildflowers, and I'm basically taking 2 songs from their debut albums from the bands from 1963 to 1975, and then just dipping our toes into the Canterbury scene to get a feel of what is it, where does it stand outside of either folk music, out of prog, out of rock, fusion, whatever. So yeah, like I said, so far we're doing it chronologically. So I've done David Allen Trio, the Wildflowers, the Soft Machine, or just Soft Machine, Caravan, Uriel, and we did Kevin Ayers, his solo album. So yeah, we're going to try to dip into a lot. So, and this one, we're going to do 1970s Gong, their debut album, which some people it's not their most popular, it's not where people go to with their trilogy, with their multiple lineup changes, but this Gong, out of this whole 20 bands, Gong is probably the only one that I'm more familiar with. So I have heard, a handful of their albums, and I actually really do like their first album very much. I think it has the most tie to not only their origins, obviously, but also other sounds of the time. So like the Canterbury scene, the other groups, Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett, and all that stuff. So you do hear a little bit more influence in their sound in their original album than they sort of started to develop and evolve into a very singular sound. So yeah, just a list we're going to do, and more bands we're going to do: Gong, Super Sister, Egg, Carol Grimes' Delivery, Robert Wyatt's solo album, Keith Tippett, Centipede, Moving Gelatin Plates, Elton Dean, Khan, Matching Mole, Isotope, Hatfield in the North, Quiet Sun, and Gilgamesh. So yeah, that's a continuation. We're going to go through all those groups, doing a couple songs from each album, and at the end of that, we'll probably encapsulate it with some number of full album listens from one or more of those bands, just to give, take a little bit deeper look into a full album. So yeah, not trying to get everything just from one song or from two songs, but it's interesting to get the initial perspective from two songs. What can you tell about this group? What can you tell about this scene? Is there any overlap, with the styles and stuff? So yeah, and I think the Canterbury philosophy, there's a lot of descriptions of it, and obviously I took a very widespread look at it. There's some that are overseas bands, so I'm taking kind of a more is more effort to this. So, and just a couple points of some descriptions of the Canterbury scene, very short ones. There was one I read that said, the point I'm making is that Canterbury is more a spirit, a way to interpret music and the role of musicians, the inclination to cross musical genres without much respect for labels, definitions, or traditions. And another one by Martin Wakeling said, in my humble opinion, there are two unifying threads throughout our music. Firstly, the tendency towards instrumental improvisation, but secondly, the possession of a uniquely English lyrical and vocal content. It's Ayers, Wyatt, Sinclair, and Allen that define it for me, the way they sing and the way they write. So yeah, that's a more narrow focus, sort of really evolving from the origins of the Wildflowers, the original members of this, if it's a scene at all. At the time, I don't think they considered it a scene, obviously. But going back to sort of those core foundational styles and just interpretations of what they wanted their particular group to be, what they sound to be. So that can be one interpretation of what the scene, sort of what the sound was like. But yeah, it's a little bit of mix of that. You can kind of hear like there's a mix of improvisation, different styles, whether it's jazz or psychedelic or folk, and then also I know in the early bands, especially even into Caravan, Soft Machine, Wildflowers, was a very English lyrical vocal interpretation. A little bit different than what was definitely out at the time. So that's one of the distinct things I hear in the vocal delivery that sounds very unique at the time. So I don't know if that will continue on through all of these groups, but there'll be some. We're just going to cover it and just see where it lays. Without further ado, let's jump into another group that we're going to continue on with, and that is going to be Gong, and we're going to go into their first album, and this one's number 6 track, and this one is called Pretty Miss Titty. And here we go.
Working in a chainstore, flip flop, blam blam. Working in the chainstore, pockets full of blood, 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 pockets full of blood.
The bloody pockets, mate.
Wide and wide.
time. Well, big bad businessman, have you any love? Big bad businessman, have you any love?
Okay, I want to pause it for 1 second because I realized I didn't give all the musicians on this, which is at least the most, just as you hear the instruments, you can sense where they are. Now, this is a complete list of musicians on this, so how many are on this particular track would be hard to say. A lot of times, yeah, that's the most thing. They don't necessarily, they say all the musicians, but they don't necessarily tell you on every track who's playing exactly on what. But we have David Allen, the originator of the group, in guitar and vocals. Gilly Smith, vocals and Space Whisper. Didier Malherbe on soprano sax and flute. Rachid Houari on drums and tabla. Dieter Gewisler on contrabass. Earl Freeman on contrabass and piano. Bar Phillips on contrabass. Burton Green on piano and piano harp, and Tasman Smith included on some voices. So yeah, 3 potential bass players on this one, but basically, yeah, you have Rachid there on drums, which I really like. That just that sound. It just sounds so natural, but also it's a very appealing snare sound on that. I like it, and yeah. So I feel for sure we've heard the bass player. Basically, just kind of a very simple rhythm section right now. But yeah, those are some of the musicians. And yeah, let's continue on, and then we'll talk more about it. Here we go.
Tis night, tis not night. I'm happy, not happy. I'm sad, not sad. Je marche pas. Bonsoir, monsieur. Bonsoir, monsieur. Bonsoir, monsieur.
You gotta prove you're a millionaire. They search you for thoughts and they measure your hair. The clothes you wear, who knows you're there? Pretty Miss Titty, she works in the city. Wider than wider, she gets out typewriter. Men catch her later, they don't love her, hate her. They just masturbate her appetite. Well, big bad businessman, have you any love? Big bad businessman, have you any love? Big bad businessman, have you any love? Big bad businessman, have you any love?
Okay, that is Gong. And I think that actually, that may include the Chainstore chant in the beginning there. Just looking at the times of the songs, it looks like it's a little longer than just Pretty Miss Titty. So I believe that beginning intro was Chainstore chant, into Pretty Miss Titty. But for some reason, I don't know, they came together in the version that I heard. But I think it's kind of fitting. It's a short introduction. So yeah, that one's obviously that one. I don't know. I first heard that, and so that's obviously in the original. So we have the original Canterbury scene, and David Allen was obviously a part of that in his own trio with Robert Wyatt and Mike Ratledge and Hugh Hopper, and then they obviously in the Wildflowers, there were some of those same members as the real originators, or evolved more musicians through the Wildflowers. And then David Allen, started his own, even in Soft Machine he was part of, but started his own group once I think he was kept out of the country in England. So in Australia and France, I think he met. So let's get into a little bit. We're going to do one more from Magic Brother, but let's get into a little bit of the early part of Gong. So David Allen. So around late 1969, Gene Caracos from BYG Records advanced David money to record 3 solo albums without a contract, and Magic Brother was the first. As I said, going back when he arrived in England in 1962, after meeting Robert Wyatt and Hugh Hopper, he formed a free jazz outfit called the David Allen Trio, which we started off with in this retrospective. And it was very bare bones, kind of like spoken word, more kind of like, it feels kind of like a 50s, 1950s Beat Generation sort of jazz with spoken word, burlesque type of thing, or poetry, I should say, spoken word poetry. When Kevin Ayers took over from Hugh Hopper 3 years later, this crew became the Soft Machine, and the band was named after the title of a William Burroughs book. And David met the author in Paddington to ask if it was okay to use the name. He had no objection, but also offered David advice that he should cut his hair and maybe move far away. Anyway, they ended up being managed by Mike Jeffrey, Jimi Hendrix's business manager, though through him they had access to and played London's coolest clubs, the Speakeasy, UFO, and Middle Earth, and one of their most memorable gigs was the ultimate psychedelic happening, 14-hour Technicolor Dream at Alexander's Palace in 1967, included Yoko Ono and John Lennon, The Pretty Things, and closed at dawn with Pink Floyd. For the first time, David no longer felt like a loner, but part of a tribe, and the Soft Machine performed. And after the Soft Machine performed, he became entranced by Syd Barrett's symphonic slide guitar playing with Pink Floyd, and this led to David's developing his own glissando guitar technique, also using echo and fuzz. But David had a very, very low opinion of his guitar playing. I'm always slightly short of what I want to achieve. That's because I probably saw Jeff Beck play so brilliantly at the Marquee, and the vision is so unassailable. It's like trying to climb Mount Everest or something. Even higher was hanging out with Hendrix and being backstage at some of his big gigs. Just seeing the effortlessness of his playing, Jeff really pushed very hard and worked very hard, but Hendrix just seemed to be floating. He would almost float on stage. It was like Cassius Clay said, being light as a butterfly. So those two, in a way, were very, very influential to David Allen. And as it happened, the authorities stepped in. Returning with the Soft Machine from a French tour in 1967, David was stopped by customs at Dover, and they didn't like the length of his hair or that his visa had run out 3 days earlier, and he was held overnight and then banned from the UK for 3 years. So, as David made his way back to Paris with a guitar and a small bag of clothes, and soon enough he and Gilly, aka Shakti Yoni, met the excellent sax and flute player Didier Malherbe, Welsh poetess Gilly Smith, whose grasp of philosophy, Eastern religion, and communal living proved to be a major influence on David. And with that, we'll go into a little bit more after the second tune out of this first album, Magic Brother. So getting into David's backstory a little bit. He's very, very interesting. He was probably the most outlandish and just passionate on his sleeve of all the early members. I think that when everybody met David, they just were like taken aback at how how much he'd already, even at a young age, seemed to be just in the middle of everything, whether it's beat poetry, and had met the those writers, also, and music. So he had a lot of ideas. So anyway, out of fate of not being able to get back into England, he took a very different path which had to be taken there. So yeah, he obviously met some new players and continued on in the way that he could. So let's do let's jump into something on that first album. Let's see. So we have, I've like at least half of this album I've listened to quite a bit. There's probably at least 3 more songs that I find really, really good. Let's get into a little bit different feel. So this one's called Gong Song.
Once upon a time, from a far-off planet, there was a little green man who came down by comet.
Okay.
I first met him in a London taxi. He told me his name was Mr. Pothead Pixie. He told me he came from a planet called Gong. He sang me this small green song. Why do you feel so good? Why do you feel so bad? Why do you think you should? Why do you ask your dad? Because you never know just where you really, really come from. You never know just who you really, really are. You never know just why do you think you're right? Why do you think you're wrong? Why do you sit and smile? Why do I sing this song? Because you never know just where you really, really come from. You never know just who you really, really are. You never know just well, I never thought that all that acid I brought make it be so strange in here. Well, every time I see you make a significant break, I know you'll never change my name. So good. Why do you feel so bad? Why do you think you should? Why do you ask your dad? Because you never know just where you really, really come from. You never know just who you really, really are. You never know just anti-vested lights, kind of swollen pint of mercy.
That was called Gong Song. So yeah, and I didn't realize that is the as someone mentioned, that is the first time they you hear the origination of some of their whole idea of gong, of the the vibrations, the ideology of the story that would become Gong's entire methodology of their belief system and their musical system and everything. So it's right there. Who knows where it started, and maybe this was just considered a small portion of the overall thing, but maybe it developed from here. But yeah, it's interesting. It probably came from a lot from, as they say, from Gillies philosophy, heavy philosophy and Eastern philosophy. So it might have come out of that in a way, but took a shape and face from more of an otherworldly position. So, but yeah, so that one was called the Gong Song. Yeah, I really liked. I mean, overall, I love this early sound. It just sounds almost. It's so wild and free at the same time. It's very rough around the edges, so it's almost like a garage rock, American sort of garage rock band. And whatever instruments you happen to have around. They happen to have a piano. They happen to have a saxophone. So it's someone who can play some melodies with a sax. And what can you do with piano? But overall, you have the basic rhythm section. You have drums, bass, and David Allen's guitar, with some wah-wah mixed in there. So it definitely has that. He's trying to get that. But overall, yeah, I think it's fantastic because it's so rough and the ideas are so just put out there without too much, a lot of, there's not all the, let's go full forward into, production and make everything seamless and quantized and as every meaning just put in and perfected and into this crystalline nature. No, it's just, let's just get some people together. We have a lot of ideas and let's just see what comes out of it, and how much of it was, I'm sure a lot of it was improvised just from simplicity of just, that we don't have the time or the inclination to take a microscopic look at this and fine tune every little note and every little pause throughout the whole song. So, and that's definitely done in some groups. It really is articulated to that nth degree. Whereas this is just a bunch of talented musicians who have some talents, who have some vision, some passion, and just see what comes out of it. And so that comes through, overall. So no matter what the level of orchestration, whatever the level of production is, you always get that core of like there's some funness to it. There's some, as I said, inspiration, that's coming through. So yeah, and overall, I like the tones that they produce. I like the drum sound, even though it's very basic. But I hear that sort of just rumbling snare sound. You hear this one on Diddy or Malherbe, so you do hear the sort of floating, lingering, saxophone throughout, just sort of improvising throughout. And then, yeah, David Allen's guitar, I really like this sort of chunky, it's got that sort of compressed, chunky wah to it, so it's kind of dirty and clean and funky at the same time. And, yeah, the bass is doing his job. I can't hear, where he fits into the mix necessarily. As far as his choices, but yeah, overall, this album, I think it offers a lot. So I'd love to listen to it all over again and kind of get an idea of a bigger concept of the album and where it sits in the sort of pantheon of Gong or pantheon of even the Canterbury scene at this moment. But yeah, I feel like the biggest thing is, inspiration, David's inspiration, for sound, and obviously his lyrical content is one of the main energies that comes out of Gong. So, and we'll get into the lyrics a little bit, but I want to start off and Tiny bit more on David. So he had said, I'm not really a hippie. I'm much more of a beatnik. I think that comes through. Yeah, he's more of a 50s beatnik than a 60s hippie. That's where all my energy started as a young man. In Paris, he stayed at the Beat Hotel and got to know the minimalist composer Terry Riley. He hooked up with the William Burroughs and performed theater pieces based on the Burroughs novel The Ticket That Exploded. David also became aware of the music and philosophies of Sun Ra. By the time David and Gilly recorded their first album for the BYG label, Ziska had gone. Didier doesn't consider Magic Brother to be a proper Gong album. It does, however, feature the first song about pothead pixies from the planet Gong. So, yeah, and I believe that is in Gong's song. I don't know what makes it a proper Gong album or doesn't make it a proper Gong album. To me, it's got David Allen, it's got Gilly. It sounds like, I guess if you consider their later stuff, the really more avant-garde stuff, what Gong is really about, then I can see that. It's a little bit more bare bones, a little bit more falling in line with some of the psychedelic stuff that was going on in England, say like a Pink Floyd or some of the other bands like that. So it is a little bit offshoot, I guess, of that, but I feel like it is very unique. Like it's its own, I feel like it's his own thing. 100%. It feels like his style incarnate, So this was the original. They would go into Camembert Electrique after this, 1971, and that one does offer a much more like widespread sort of palette of sounds and avant-garde sort of into the space sounds and stuff like that. So they definitely go into that in the next album a bit more. But mostly what I like about Gong is their song material. I do like the songs that, no matter how strange they get, I don't mind, as long as the sort of core of the song and the melodies and, whether it changes into, they have choruses and verses, whether it follows a normal structure. I don't think they do exactly, but if they, when they kind of follow into that more avant-garde of a sort of familiar song structure with choruses and verses, and then they can go into their little interludes and stuff like that. Those are probably my favorite. Yeah, I like those. But they'll have these long sort of vamps also. These long sort of just almost spiritual chants and things like that, musical chants. Not necessarily vocal, but just instrumental sort of songs that just sort of go on and kind of go off on a similar vibe, a similar, just kind of like a one chord chant. And just kind of do more on improvisation with different instruments and stuff like that. But yeah, I like this first album. This is a great introduction to Gong, I think, because it's just the origins. It doesn't go fully evolved yet into their sort of space, sort of those really elongated pieces that they do, more about sound and stuff like that. So yeah, but let's get into a little bit of just the lyrics before we move on with this. So for the Gong song, yeah, it's basically once upon a time in a far-off planet, there was a little green man came down by comet. I first met him in London taxi. He told me his name was Mr. Pothead Pixie. He told me he came from a planet called Gong, and he sang me this small green song. Why do you feel so bad? Or why do you feel so good? Why do you feel so bad? Why do you think you should? Why do you ask me that? Because you never really know just where you really, really come from. You never know just who you really are. You never know just who's the fool, do you? Because you never really, and that's the chorus. Well, I never thought that all that acid out there would make it seem so strange in here. Yeah. Well, every time I see. So yeah, there was obviously, we shouldn't mention Gong and Mr. Pothead Pixie, and a lot of other groups at the time, without talking about, the drug use, the sort of mind expansion going on at the time. So that, you can take that to be whatever percentage of an influence into the writing, into the composition, into the style of performance, into the behaviors of how they perform, how they interact and arrange with each other. So yeah, it all depends on, you know, what state of mind they're in the process, but it certainly has an influence on their thinking, you know, at the time and beyond. So yeah, it's a part of it. And I think with David, yeah, for sure, it was all about, you know, a world within a world within a world within his mind and outward. So, and that is Gong. 1970, the Magic Brother, the Gong, 1970. So part of Canterbury scene. Yeah, he was a part of it. So we're going to do expansions based on the some of the members and how they moved out into other groups, and then some of the groups that were just sort of we consider part of has some overlap into the Canterbury scene, into the styles, into the improvisation, into the use of cross genres and other styles of music incorporated, whether or particularly English lyrical content, English lyrical styles, and beyond that. So we're just going to have a wide berth when we listen to these groups. So yeah, if you want to listen to, we'll maybe listen to some Gong further on down the road for sure. Love to do a full album sometime, but they have a lot of albums and a lot of good stuff, so it might be hard to pick one, but maybe to do a poll at some point on which Gong album we should listen to. So at that, yeah, we're going to continue on. We're going to continue on down the list, and we're going to finish after this. We're going to jump into some more the Canterbury scene bands, including Super Sister, Egg, Carol Grimes' Delivery, Robert Wyatt's first solo album. So yeah, we're going to continue on, and hope you're enjoying it. And but like I said, give some more recommendations if you have any of the full albums from the Canterbury scene that you think would be good at the end of this retrospective. And yeah, as far as more full albums, we have more coming, as I said in the beginning. And be sure to leave your recommendations for any style of music, for electric blues, top tunes you like, punk music, top 3 to 5 songs that you think I should cover in an upcoming video. And yeah, we'll go from there. So I appreciate it very much, everybody being here, and look forward to the next one. And I really am enjoying this retrospective. I mean, there's like I said, Gong is probably the only group that I'm pretty familiar with, to a good degree. And the rest of the bands, it's kind of just me really finding it through music, you know, finding their going into their first debut albums. And so there's a lot of new music here, but so far, yeah, I'm definitely finding some gems. Caravan was amazing. I loved the Caravan songs I listened to. Kevin Ayers, I really loved his voice and some of his arrangements. The simplicity of it and the sort of childlike innocence of it was amazing. And even the Wildflowers, some of those early recordings, I think you can kind of hear the core of like what it could become. You know, it had a lot of potential. I'd say even on their own, yeah, I think they were great songs at the core. Just very you know, without all the support and production and all this stuff, just pushing it into new spheres of styles of music, but everything was there. So yeah, thanks guys, and we'll see you soon, and check out the next one. We'll be around.